Hello and welcome to another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest today is Pulitzer Prize nominated journalist Rose Horowitz, journalist and founder and host of Women to Follow. My name is Neil Parekh. I am the executive producer of the show and occasional guest host. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. We're also live on Rose's channels on her Facebook page and both her personal Twitter and her Women to Follow Twitter account. Thank you to everyone who is joining us. Please like, please comment, please share. Let us know where you're watching from. Leave a comment in Facebook. Make sure you press play on the video if you're watching on somebody's page. We will welcome folks who are watching and then get on with the show. But first, a little bit of a preview of what's to come. This week, our guest on Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along is Rose Horowitz, a Pulitzer Prize nominated journalist who founded Women to Follow, a global hashtag trend that reached 12 million views in its first 2 weeks. The movement's goal is to amplify women's voices on social media. Over the past year, Rose has hosted 29 Women to Follow shows, generating more than 300,000 social media impressions. My name is Neil Parekh, and I will be the guest host. The inaugural Women to Follow Summit on Tuesday, February 28th, will be a flagship event kicking off Women's History Month. The keynote speaker will be Andrea Chalupa, co-host of Gaslit Nation. The summit will feature 3 panels: women's rights and democracy in the world, empowerment and entrepreneurship, and women leading change in Web3 and AI. In July 2018, I invited Rose to be a guest on the New York Times Read Along, just after she launched the Women to Follow hashtag. Since it's the last Sunday of the month, we'll also focus on the New York Times for Kids, a special print-only section. We'll also look at a special New York Times Magazine piece, 3 years into COVID, we still don't know how to talk about it. Sri Srinivasan is our host. I am the executive producer and occasional guest host. Soumya Grover will help produce the show, engaging with the audience on Facebook and LinkedIn. The show is produced by Digimentors. We produce high-quality virtual and hybrid events for organizations big and small around the world. We also do social and digital consulting, training, and workshops. Again, Rose Horowitz is our guest, live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. That's a little bit of a preview of what's to come today. We're looking forward to today's show, and we want to give all sorts of support for Rose Horowitz, a colleague of ours at Digimentors. Let's go ahead and welcome some of the folks who are watching. We have first up Stefan Kaplan watching on LinkedIn, and right away he's tagging the guests for the Women to Follow Summit. We have naming a number of people who will be speaking at the summit on Tuesday. Stefan is one of the producers for that event, and we'll share more information about it in a little bit. Patricia Freudenberg is also watching on LinkedIn and watching from New York. Patricia, always great to see you. And let's see, Doug Levy is watching from California, from Northern California. Doug, always great to have you join us. Thank you so much. Soumya is watching from the Upper East Side, and she's helping to produce the show on Sri's Facebook and LinkedIn. So thank you, Soumya, for your work. Our Iowa contingent is here. Ken, always good to have you there. We always appreciate you joining in, regardless of what the weather is like. Hopefully, it's not too cold today. I know over the last few days, it's been rough. Um, let's see, who else do we have joining us? Jonathan is watching from the East Village. Jonathan, thank you. We'll be talking about Sri's COVID show a little bit later. And Jonathan, Rose helped to produce that show. She was key for getting guests for 275 shows. Um, Jonathan watched every single one of those shows. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Our next person watching. Hi, mom. Hi, mom. Watching from Tampa, Florida. And my mom is saying giving a nice message to Rose. Today's subject is very good. Rose's shows will inspire many women. Thank you, mom. And she's offering her congratulations to Rose. We have Miriam Berkeley watching as usual from Hell's Kitchen in New York City. Thank you, Miriam. Um, Jonathan is giving me a field promotion, as it were, instead of guest host. I refer to myself as occasional guest host. He wants to call me the frequent guest host. I will take whatever title comes my way. I will take this opportunity, as I usually do. It's been several years now since Sri first gave me his Facebook password. Now, Sri Srinivasan, guru on social media, incredible following. He's been doing this for years. Uh, when he first gave me his password to Facebook and said, "I want you to sit in for me on the New York Times read along, go live on my account." That was an incredible honor. It still is every week that I get to sit in the big chair, as we call it. So thank you, Sri, again, for trusting me with your show, with your baby. Sri has been hosting the show for 7.5 years, and it means a lot to all of us. What a great community we've built up. Uh, Bonjour, Therese. Therese is watching from Yonkers. Thank you so much for joining us. We have Monica Mirchandani watching on LinkedIn from New York City. Monica, thank you for joining us. Don't know if you've watched previous shows. This is the first time I remember seeing you comment, at least in a while. So appreciate it and hope you're able to stick around. Um, let's see. Jonathan is referring to his watching all those COVID shows as his sole claim to fame. Jonathan, I'm sure it's not your only claim to fame. And we have our first viewer on YouTube, Carol King, who has been a great support to Rose on the Women to Follow Summit. She's also helped with a few shows for the New York Times read along, particularly the Democracy Day event last fall. She has reported from Latin America and New York City for public radio, and she's currently Latin America and New York City. She's currently in Tampa Bay. Um, and and Monica says, I've watched a lot, but it's the first episode in a long while. Well, thank you so much for um, coming back. And Carol, we're thrilled to have you helping Rose behind the scenes. We're doing our part today by talking about the Women to Follow Summit and giving Rose a bit more of a platform. Most of you know Rose. She's a frequent watcher. She's a part of our New York Times read along community, part of our Digimentors family. But like we did last week, where we had Sunny Slaughter on the show, we wanted to introduce you to one of our own, particularly because of this big summit that she has coming up next on Tuesday. And Doug says the Women to Follow Summit sounds good. It really does. And we'll hear more about it shortly. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at what's in the paper today. And we'll do our quick tour of the front page sections. And then we will work to get Rose on the show. And while we're doing that, I'll just make a note. Rose, you may need to refresh your browser. Your camera did not connect when you came back backstage. So try and do that. Try and refresh your browser, and hopefully we'll be able to get you back on. Um, so let's start off with the front page, the display story. Taking up this much of the front page: alone, underage, and exploited for labor. Migrant children toil in hazardous jobs across the U.S. Um, it's the migrant, the immigrant challenges are huge, and it's just very sad if you think about where people are fleeing from, the situation they're leaving, and then when they come here, not only are they used as political pawns, but now they're being exploited. And these are the underage migrants, which is really upsetting. The lead is focusing on Europe and Ukraine. Year of conflict has left Europe forever changed. Peace mentality after Cold War gives way to an embrace of military power. This is We passed the 1 year anniversary of the attack on Ukraine earlier this week. Below the fold and right at the fold, there are a couple of headlines on the right. If you can see them, uh, public is wary of China's push for baby boom. They're having trouble maintaining their population after years of trying to control population. And then flaunting hair, Iranian woman defy hijab law. That is very interesting. We'll take a look at that later. Um, Below the fold, and this is a continuation of the migrant story. Below the fold, bombing became a historical footnote, but he will never forget. 30 years ago today, a harbinger of 9/11. This might have been the World Trade Center bombing, the first one, in 93. That's right, February 26, 1993. I actually remember my aunt, Molly, was working at the World Trade Center. Um, and she had to escape. She had to walk down 100 flight of stairs to get out. This is back in '93 when they exploded a bomb in the parking garage. Um, I always like looking at the second section of the front page, as I like to call it. In New York at College Point, they can print this whole section, 40 some odd pages. This is only 34 today in one go. But when they print the paper at 27 different printing plants around the country, and they have to coordinate with them, and sometimes they have to make adjustments. So in DC, it's printed by the Washington Post. I've also lived in Seattle, printed by the Seattle Times. Um, the After 22 pages, they have to do a second section, and it's always interesting to me what story is on that next page. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. But here it's in blue collar states. Our brand is pretty damaged, Democrats find. So let's go ahead and take a look at what else. We're looking at the New York Times special supplement, New York Times for Kids. Always a favorite. We always like to spend time with it. It's a print only special section. And you should note that we have a PDF on our website only until noon today. We get it by special permission from the New York Times, from the group that publishes. We had the New York Times for Kids. Amber Williams, the editor, was our guest last year. Um, and we make this available to you. If you're not a subscriber, there's no other way to get this special PDF. So go to our website and grab that, and we'll spend more time looking at it later in the show. We also want to take a look at this special report in the New York Times Magazine about COVID. 3 years later, we still don't know how to talk about what happened. It's a look at the COVID archives at Columbia University, and what we'd love to ask you about is, what are your thoughts about COVID? And you can take this any way you want, but do you feel COVID is over? Do you feel it's still with us? Are you still, taking precautions? Have you thought about what happened over these last 3 years, particularly the first year in lockdown? Did you do any writing or any projects? Have you reflected on that? We'll see in this article, a lot of people have actually shied away from reflecting on what happened. We will take a look later. The Sunday opinion section. This is a story, 1 year inside a radical new approach to America's overdose crisis, by Janine Interlandi. A big opinion piece there. And it's interesting to me, if you look at the section, that's the top half, and then you can see the bottom half, they're not promoting any other pieces in today's opinion. So that'll be interesting to see. So we'll just finish this wrap up of the paper, and then we'll bring Rose Horowitz on to join us. I see her backstage, and we are thrilled to have her to be able to talk about women to follow. The Sunday business section, Elizabeth Coach knows what you're thinking. The daughter of a right-wing billionaire is working to bridge societal divides. Sure, roll your eyes, but also, why not her? That's interesting. The busy furniture hustlers of Silicon Valley, tech companies' abandoned office furnishings are part of a booming trade. And then they have reefers on the bottom to Shop Talk, the evolving role for Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve. And then a piece on retiring. Your brain may present the biggest roadblock on the path to saving for the future. Very, very interesting. Let's take a look at Sunday styles. The story is Where's the Snow? That's interesting. Snowboarding brands are revising. This is the bottom half. Snowboarding brands are revising their strategies in the face of climate change. If you're asking about where the snow is, if you happen to see the promo video I shared on Twitter and on in the Sri's Advanced Social Media group on Facebook yesterday, I jumped out yesterday morning. We got flurries. We were expecting maybe a tenth of an inch of snow at most, but it was enough. I went outside, and our neighbor came by and knocked on the door for Emily to play with them. They ran around in the snow, and then obviously it all went away. But yes, not a lot of snow, at least here in the in the Virginia D.C. area. I know that Iowa got hit, the Midwest, even California got hit pretty badly, but somehow we've escaped it. The other big sections in this week's paper are the spring previews, the art previews. So you have With Less, Much More, a revival of A Doll's House. Jessica Chastain has no props or period costumes and not much of a set, and she likes it just fine. So focus on theater in this section. And then Arts and Leisure, a rock odyssey, Page to TV, bringing Daisy Jones and the Six, a bestseller about a fictional 70s band, to the screen was a long road. Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll is hard to do in a pandemic. This is by Catherine Rossman, a former guest on the show. I still remember when Sri went to her house in New York City. It's probably around 2018, if I remember correctly. And then finally, we have the book review. What's Mine is Yours. Culture, the Story of Us, From Cave Art to K-Pop, by Martin Pushner, is a forceful rebuke to those who argue that culture can be owned by groups, nations, religions, or races. So that is our tour of the front pages of each of the sections. We'll certainly come back to the paper after talking with our guest. I wanted to reintroduce our guest to you. Rose Horowitz is a journalist and founder and host of Women to Follow. And we're going to be talking about the Women to Follow Summit in particular that is coming up in just on Tuesday. She's also a Pulitzer Prize nominated journalist. So with that, we are thrilled to have Rose Horowitz join the show.
Hi.
Hi, Rose.
Hi, good morning.
Good to see you. Good to see you. We've been friends for a number of years, and you've been part of our Read Along family and Read Along community. I want to kick things off right away by sharing a blast from the past. That's you on the New York Times Read Along back in July of 2018. If you remember, I had you on the show. Let's go right back to there. That's right when you started using the Women to Follow hashtag. Do you remember what that was like? Do you remember that initial appearance?
Yes, I started it. I think it was July 3rd. I had been at the Y and I came out of the Y, looked at my cell phone to see what was up and checked Twitter. And I saw a story by a post from Gender Avenger, which is a nonprofit. and it was citing a study done in DC about how biased the coverage is in terms of 82% of men followed and retweeted men, and the same held true for women. And I thought that is just crazy. We're in 2018. How can that be? And I put out a tweet just sitting, in the lobby saying, let's get this party started. I'm going to name 3 women to follow. And I tagged a few different people, some men, some women, to name different women to follow. And went to the library, and like my phone was just, I was there to write something quietly, and the phone just kept dinging and dinging. It's just crazy. And I came home that day and said to the family, I think something happened on Twitter, because they kind of were always like, "You're on Twitter?" Yeah, yeah, so, sort of like that. And then Neil, you called me that week and
Yeah,
said, "Hey, Rose, just want to check. Like, did you start this?"
I was doing my due diligence, right? Just wanted to make sure.
So, and I had done my due diligence to see if it had been a hashtag that was used, and I found there was some woman that events group that occasionally used it.
I had seen that. Yeah,
But I was able to say, no, that's me. So,
that's great.
so yeah, and I think you did some analysis, and we discovered in the first 2 weeks that it uh, had a reach of 12 million.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember, I actually they're 2 of the people that I remember naming in my women to follow, my 3 women to follow. I had named Deepa Iyer, a former guest on the show and a great friend of ours, does excellent work. And also
She became a guest. I did a profile of her, a written profile.
profile of her later as well. I remember she's here in DC, so I went up to Silver Spring and interviewed her one morning for the read along. And then I also had AOC as another of my 3 women to follow, and I'm blanking on the third one, unfortunately. But I do remember at the time I worked with United Way, and I did a United Way version of women to follow, naming the women leaders at United
Mhm.
Way. So um, it definitely struck a nerve, and it was definitely important. So kudos to you. Thank you for amplifying women's voices and finding ways. When the stories are out there and people are not interviewing women, not including women in the conversation. This has really been a game changer. So thank you for that. I
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to pull in a couple of comments. Patricia Freudenberg says, "Welcome back on air, Rose. Good to see you." And Paula Kiger is saying, "Good morning from Washington D.C." Paula, so glad for you to take the time to join us and watch today. Really appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying your time in our nation's capital. Um, Stefan is tagging more people to watch the show. Stefan, thank you. Always important to do that. Um, and let's see, Debbie Bernick makes reference to the New York Times Kids section. It appeals to the kid in all of us, and she keeps it for her grandson, which is good. Even though it does say adults are not supposed to read it, grown-ups are not supposed to read it. We won't rat you out, uh, Deborah. Don't worry. Um, and Diane is thrilled to hear more about the Women to Follow Summit. We'll get to that in just a moment. And I just want to see who else is joining us. Um, let's see. Patricia is talking about the photo that we put on our site. It is from the New York Times Magazine article, that photo of New York City, an empty New York City. So we'll take a close look at that in a little bit. Um, and Stefan, catching up on some of the older comments. Stefan's mom evacuated the first World Trade Center bombing in '93 that I mentioned earlier when we were going through the paper. It was one of the best and first women cops on the beat back in the days. Always remember all first responders who ran into the towers to rescue and help so many to safety. Absolutely, Stefan. Absolutely. Pradnya Haldapur is watching from Silver Spring. Pradnya, thanks for joining us. And Naomi Service is saying it's a chilly morning on the Upper West Side. Welcome to the show. And Renee Edelman is joining. It's been a while since Renee has joined us. She tweeted about the show as well.
Yeah.
I know she's excited. Thank you so much, Renee. Renee is a close friend of ours, a friend of the show, a friend of Sri's. Thank you for all of your work, Renee. We really appreciate it. So let's dig into women to follow, Rose. Here is a card. Give us an overview. What we have specific cards. We'll talk about the individual panels. We'll talk about the keynote speaker, but kind of broad picture for folks who may not have been paying attention or don't know about the summit. What are you trying to do on Tuesday?
What I'm trying to do is, I've been doing Woman to Follow. First, I did written profiles, and then I started to do my Woman to Follow show, a live stream show that's broadcast using StreamYard, but to four of my platforms. And I've interviewed amazing guests, and sometimes I've done more than one guest. I've done several with two or three guests. But for this, in ahead of Women's History Month, I thought it would be great to have a flagship, a flagship Woman to Follow event. Sometimes my guests have called me afterwards and said, "Well, are you going to have a mastermind, or what do is there something else you're going to do that we can participate in?" And I thought, to do a summit now, right before, it's the day before, in line with Women's History Month, would bring attention to my mission uh, to amplify women's voices and bring these women in different fields, and sort of I have a plan of how the panels work, and bring attention to things that I think are really important, um, and kick off Women's History Month.
That's great. So let's talk about some of the speakers and the panels. Start off with let's start off with panel one.
Okay.
We have this focus on women's rights and democracy in the world.
Yeah, I thought that if we're going to do a panel on women, we should look big picture first. And since in the U.S., women's uh, rights are threatened by the Supreme Court's ban on abortion and other things happening in other states uh, that threaten women's rights, and our everyone's civil rights. So big issue. But I thought that it's focusing on three countries now in the news that are really facing dire conditions would be a good thing to do. And so we're going to focus in this panel on Ukraine, Iran, and Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And I've Andrea Chalupa, who's the keynote speaker for the day, is an author, a journalist and author, and co-host of uh, Gaslit Nation, a very popular podcast. And she is Ukrainian, and she has anyway, very interesting story. Her grandfather had lived through the Holodomor, which is the Stalin-induced famine in Ukraine, and she now has written a book about it, and she's also been a screenwriter for this play, a film called Mr. Jones, where she ties in her father's story, and also that George Orwell's what happened in Ukraine was the model sort of for what Orwell did in Animal Farm.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that. That's
Yeah.
interesting. That's interesting. And where did you connect with her? Was she a guest on your show initially?
No, I had my first show on Ukraine, which was like less than 2 weeks into Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I had three women on the show. One was a Ukrainian journalist. One was and two were a co-hosts of something called the Kremlin File, a podcast.
The Kremlin
And
File. I remember that.
yeah, so in that show, like a lot of interest in that show. But I went back to one of those women and said, hey, who would you recommend for this panel? And she said, oh, you have to have Andrea Chalupa. So she said she's got fresh ideas. She's great. And at first I reached out to her, and so she put in a word for me, and then I played, tried to reach her on Twitter, and then, anyway, we connected. And last night, the Media and Democracy Center did a screening of this film, Mr. Jones, which is about a journalist who goes to Ukraine and tries to cover this story, and then he's shunned out of the country, and no one wants to print his story. And so it's a great tale, and eventually he's killed off as others who try to tell the story of how hungry the people, at the expense of what Stalin was doing, was building up his military, building up everything at the expense of, taking all this grain from Ukraine and other Soviet satellites and bringing it into Russia.
Great. And I want to make sure that people see the website for Women to Follow, women-to-follow.com. And I know Soumya has shared it in the chat. Certainly click on that link for more information about the summit and to register. You definitely will appreciate it. And Rose, just asking, and I don't know if you've planned for this or not. If people can't make the summit, will they be able to see the recordings afterward?
They will. They can watch them. They'll still be on, archived on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
But we're offering a bonus, for people who register.
Sure.
We're going to have sometime in March, a Q&A interactive session with myself, Jennifer, and I'm going to invite some of the guests to join us.
Good.
So that, the summit is sort of packed in terms of, doing what you're doing with getting questions. We probably won't be able to do much of that. So that will give people a chance to just, talk about what takeaways they had, what questions they have, what they can do to follow up. Because we're going to, the other thing we're going to do for the summit is I've asked all the speakers to send me takeaways, but things that actionable ideas that we can take with us and put in, because sometimes, you go to a conference and you're like, what are you going to do with all that information?
Absolutely.
So we'll be sending the people who register, these actionable statements from all the speakers.
Great. I want to bring in Colette Dickinson, who's watching from New Jersey. Colette, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to mention Patricia Freudenberg is just tagging people like crazy on LinkedIn to bring people in and make sure they know about the conversation. So, Patricia, thank you so much for your support and for your help in spreading the word. We also want to make sure bring in Stefan's comment. First of all, Pradnya saying, love to hear about women supporting women. Absolutely. That's what this is all about. There are also some men supporting women as well. So let's not forget the men. Stefan, who has been producing your shows and is helping with the Women to Follow Summit. Rosa started one of the most powerful and special movements on Twitter and social. A true leader. The Women to Follow Summit is this Tuesday. Join us. So many important discussions to be had. Absolutely. Stefan. And we want to welcome everyone. Remind people who are watching on Rose's Facebook and the two Twitter accounts. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. And again, if you are watching on Facebook, please make sure to press play on the video so that if you leave a comment, we'll see it. Remember the way that Facebook works, it's coming in your timeline. You might just stop and watch it. If you comment on the share, or if you comment on the post as it's coming through, we may not actually see your comment and would not be able to put it on the screen. So let's go back to talking about the summit, Rose. We talked about the first panel And the
I just
keynote
I just want
speaker.
to bring up
Sure.
that we'll also be having a woman from Ukraine joining us, a writer,
Oh, good.
and she's a war crimes researcher, and she's written some books that have won awards, and she's head of Penn Ukraine, and she's been going around. If you follow her on social media, her name is Victoria Amelina, and it's V Amelina is
Is
the
she is she on one of the panels, Rose?
yes. So
So
she's on.
we're
She's
gonna
going to be
talk about.
joining us from Kiev. She said she's in the war zone now,
Wow.
but tomorrow she'll be somewhere where she can have a tech check. So she's
So
been taking pictures and just telling a very personal story of what she's
sure.
personal and political story of what she's seeing. So
I
I'm
wanted.
excited that she'll join us, and we have two people who are one is Arabic from
I'm going to
Lebanon.
stop you right there, Rose. We have the panel cards. We're going to go to the panels.
Oh,
I just
okay.
want to let folks know Pradnya is hopping over to LinkedIn to tag more people from her network. So thank you. Therese is saying it's a very powerful and timely summit. Absolutely. So what I was asking is that we do have the panel cards. So
Okay.
let's talk about the panels. You were talking about the speakers. Victor, you mentioned Victoria Amelina. She's the
Yes,
one that's in Ukraine.
she's in
Um,
Ukraine. Yes.
great. And that's panel one, right?
Yes.
Women's rights and democracy in the world. Victoria, Lena, is Andrea going to be on the panel as well as the keynote?
I'm not sure yet. That's to be
Okay,
determined.
okay, great. And then panel two
Yes.
um, is Indra Bartona, Gail Becker, and Bobby Wasserman. Empowerment and entrepreneurship. Tell us about that.
All three women, had been somewhat in corporate and had a vision for starting their own business. Gail Becker was in worked at Edelman for quite a few years, and she had two sons who are have to are silly have celiac and have to have gluten-free food, and she said she would spend like 2 hours in the kitchen making them this dough, and she said to herself, it can't be this hard. And she went to some big food manufacturers and said, hey, I've got this recipe, will you make it? And they all said no. They didn't want to take a chance on somebody who was an unknown in the food industry. So she created her own brand called Cauliflower, and it now has, I don't know, 10 or 12 brands. It does pizza, it does fried chicken, and Inc. magazine profiled her as one of the her company as one of the top 10 food innovators
Hmm.
in 2022.
Interesting. Interesting. Um, and uh, and so that was Gail's story. What about
That's Gail's.
Indra and Bobby?
um, Indra is from Australia, and she had done some modeling and acting, and she now is a founder of her own production company. So she's working on some feature films, some documentaries. And she also, when during the pandemic, she started doing some meditation videos and was using a YouTube channel. And then when Twitter started this audio rooms,
Hmm.
Twitter Spaces, she created this community called the Positivity Vibe Tribe. And she must have, like, I don't know, 8,000, 10,000 people that are part of that community. And she does like two or three shows a week, where she talks about not positivity so much as like just be positive, but she brings in people and ways to talk about how to stay positive in terms of giving yourself uh, affirmations, in terms of taking that walk, doing things that will put you in a better place. So when you come up on hard times, you'll know what to do.
Interesting. Interesting.
And
That's
Bobby Wasserman is came from the corporate world. I think may have also been at Edelman for a little bit, and she had a very tough time. I think after a divorce, in selling her house and getting it ready, and just learning about how much there is to be a homeowner. And has founded this group called Single Lady Estates with a mission to help women financially, empower themselves as homeowners.
Hmm. Great, great. And then you have a third panel, women leading change in Web3 and AI. So I just want to take a moment. You know, this the range of speakers. You have women's rights and democracy in the world, right? From several hotspots, empowerment and entrepreneurship, so a business focus, and a tech focus, women leading change in Web3 and AI. Um, and I see Jennifer Navarrete is one of the speakers. She's also helping you to produce the summit in terms of the overall event.
She is.
Stefan is producing, I believe, doing the live stream production.
Mhm.
But tell us about this panel.
Well, the idea of this panel, if you look, I know that it may not seem that there's a logic between among the panels, but there is in that one in the world, and then then taking that empowerment and bringing it to you and what we can do ourselves as women, and be entrepreneurs, and then looking ahead, what's the future, and looking to tech and Web3 and AI as the future, and women getting in on the ground floor of these changes. So these panelists, Shira Lazar is a CEO of What's Trending, which is this huge digital website, sort of pop culture, but it has it's almost 1 million. It has almost 1 million um, followers, and she herself has 360,000 followers. So she's big. And as the pandemic went on, though, she began getting involved in the issue of wellness. And she's starting, she now brings that idea of wellness to different companies, but she's also an advocate for Web3. And when we spoke a little bit before, a pre-interview, she talked about wanting to be the bridge for Web3
Okay.
to women who may not be familiar with it. A lot of times women might stay away from the tech, and the idea is that this is going to be here. It's going to be powerful. Get in on the ground floor, know what's happening.
Okay. Great. Great.
And the other three, Mariah Howard is really a great spirit. I know her through some Twitter groups, and she's doing all kinds of things. I don't know. She says she's so young that people question her because they say, "How could you know all these things?" But she does. And going around the country, and she does things like she helps companies figure out how to deal with the Small Business Administration, and she's looking at blockchains. And but she's an engineer. I think she's an engineer by training. And Jennifer Navarrete has been a podcast producer for 17 years, and is as she calls it, a Web3 evangelist. She is always there's a group there. There's something called Hive on the web on Web3, which I now am part of, and sort of bridging the gap between, because many things that you can do on this Web3 space, similar to Twitter, but her thing is that you gain ownership. So if I wrote a story for a paper that's gone defunct, the story is it's lost, it doesn't exist. But if you own that if you have that on the blockchain, you own that story forever.
Interesting.
And Leah Stevens is on Web3 and does, I don't know yet too much about what she does, but I will learn. But people, she offers sort of a platform for people to experiment and do things on Web3.
Sure. And you're not the only one who is going to be learning or needs to learn. Pradnya says, "What is Web3?" I guess I'll have to attend this panel, and I will certainly join her in that sentiment. I'm still trying to figure that out myself. But I want to give a shout out to Stefan. In addition to the comments he's made, he went through and tagged a number of people who he thought would be interested in watching the show. Elaine Ciolino is a former guest on our show as well, and he's doing this all on LinkedIn. And we mentioned Pradnya went to LinkedIn to check in with her groups. She mentioned Chief Women, Women in Tech, and then also NYTReadalong.org. So we're definitely getting some good exposure and visibility for the summit, Rose.
It's
I
great.
want to
Thank you.
remind people you can follow Rose on Twitter and Instagram at Rose Horowitz 31. You can also follow her Women to Follow account on Twitter. That's women underscore to underscore follow on Twitter. And as we mentioned earlier, you can register and learn more about Tuesday's summit at women-to-follow.com, women-to-follow.com. All of these links are on our website for the show if you want to click in and get more details. Um, so we definitely, we're looking forward to the show. I'll let you know, Rose. I won't be able to make it, unfortunately. I registered as soon as I got it, but I have a doctor's appointment that day. I did call to try and move my doctor's appointment, and I didn't see Dr. Chandrashekar watching. I don't think she was able to join in this morning, but it's a follow up on my ear issues that I talked about the last few weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And when I talked to the doctor's office, I said, "Can I move my appointment a little bit? I want to be able to go to this summit." They said, "Sure." The doctor is booking 6 months out right now. Are you sure you want to reschedule? So I want to make sure I made a good faith effort. But I will be looking forward to the recordings
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
all of the content, and we'll certainly be amplifying it as much as we can. Um, with in addition to the Women to Follow Summit, we want to kind of give people a little bit of the grounding. This didn't come out of the blue. I mean, not only has Rose had a long career in journalism and has been an advocate for years, but she worked with Sri very closely on the COVID show. If you remember, we mentioned it earlier in the production. This was, after 275 episodes, and I think the total went up to 293. 525 guests, 303 women. You can see from 75 different cities, 22 different countries. And I will, share with folks specifically when I talked to Sri about that. I said, because I was involved a little bit, I was kind of paying attention to the show, helping out when I can, but really it was you and Vandana and Sri doing it. And the message I got from Sri, I'm going to quote him: please give her all the credit for the guests. To get a credible guest every day for 275 days in the pandemic, including weekends and holidays, is unprecedented in any TV show for the same three people to work on a show without a holiday every day. So, want to make sure, kudos on the work that you did on the show, and also to know how much your work was appreciated in terms of making that such a huge success. Certainly, I'm sure you put some of those skills to work. I saw you tweeting at people on Twitter, asking them to be a keynote speaker. Just kind of, hey, you didn't have their email, couldn't get into their DMs. I'm just going to tweet them publicly. I don't care, But that's what a good booking agent does. So kudos to you.
I did it there was a 17-year-old who had written a letter to Trader Joe's
Oh yeah.
about packaging because she said it was, it was racially, it was it's not correct, and so I called Sri in the middle and I went after this woman. I mean, I had seen it. He said, "Do you think you can find her?" And like 3 hours later, I said, "She's booked." So
That's great. That's great. Pradnya, as someone who's
yeah,
relied on the
and
COVID
Maria
show,
Ressa was,
Maria Ressa,
yeah,
before she won the Nobel Prize,
I
right?
booked her.
This was a big deal. Pradnya said some of us relied on the COVID show to get through those early days of the pandemic, an important view into the outside world. And Stefan added, Rose, guest booker supreme. Um, that's kudos to you. I'll put in a question from Patricia. She's asking, who is your most memorable mentor? And I'll amend that to say, you mentioned Maria Ressa, but who is your most memorable guest that you booked?
I think Maria Ressa, she was, of course I knew about her, and just, she was just so powerful when she came on the show, and so dynamic, so upbeat. She was facing, when we had her on that summer, I had called her as she was that week, got her on the phone, or texting, when she was in the middle of appearing in court and facing at a maximum, 100 years in prison.
Hmm.
And when she was on the show, she was just so bouncy. And, we said, "Oh, well, how do you, live on like this?" She was home arrest, and she said, I look at the glass half full, and I just wake up every day, and, and just what she said, what she said about democracy, what was happening in the Philippines, and what was happening, that we're at this point where, everything is broken. Journalism is broken, and then she, it was pretty neat to see her then win the Pulitzer Prize. And I was following it because I had seen stories that she might win it. So
Sure.
very happy. And now she's out with a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
So her, and, I mean, in my life, I interviewed a Holocaust survivor. That was an amazing interview.
And what about most memorable mentor? Would you?
Mentor. I worked years ago with an investigative reporter who had been at the Philadelphia Inquirer, whose name is Bob Frump,
Hmm.
and he was managing editor of the Knight Ridder paper I was working at, the Journal of Commerce. And we got a letter, we got something through the, under the door, that was in a manila envelope with no identification. And it was some shipping companies accusing other shipping companies of monopolizing the U.S. Food for Peace cargo.
Wow.
And he said, "Rose, check this out." And I spent 3 months investigating how the U.S. Food for Peace, how the money for the U.S. food for going to Sudan was ending up in the pockets of some middlemen. And I had a secret, source in government who I would give a pen name to and meet up, and I had sources in, U.S. Department of Agriculture, all kinds of things. And we went to press with this story, and the big shipping company that was a focus, sent a letter to the paper, "We're going to sue you," and then the Senate Foreign Relations Committee held hearings on this question of how this bidding was awarded, and they changed the law to be from a closed bidding system to an open bidding system.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's impressive. That's
So that
impressive.
year that was the story that was nominated for the Pulitzer, and I got an Associated Press Managers Award and a World Hunger Year Award, and it changed. It wasn't the only investigative story I did, but it changed that legislation, way things worked.
Kudos. Talking about the COVID show, Jonathan said, just getting back to that it gave shape to many viewers' days, and it was something to do, someplace to go. More importantly, something remarkably high quality, both in terms of guests and production value. So kudos to you.
Thank you,
Um,
Jonathan. Thank you. It was always great to see you, and wherever you were, you tuned in. And it was really, I've told people, when I tell people about this show, and building community, because like everywhere in social media now, you're hearing the word, the buzzword is community.
yeah,
And we built a community, and by Sri taking on that show and doing it every day, like I would sometimes think, like, why do we have to do it every
I
day?
I thought he was
Like,
crazy. I thought he was crazy when he started it.
yeah. Yeah. What do you mean? What do you mean there's no Sunday off?
Right?
But that I think, and during the time, Sri is an innovator, and so doing it that way over, during that time, it did give people around the world, a place to check in, and we were covering COVID, but not just the medical part of COVID, but I did a show with actors, two women, what were they doing during this time of
Yeah.
COVID? We had authors, we had an author who is under attack for they're banning his books, Jerry Craft, who's a children's book writer.
You also covered the
Republicans.
economic issues, the
Yeah.
racial issues that were coming
Mhm.
up at that time. It really was a broad ranging
You did a
show.
show on the night of January 6th,
Yep.
which
I remember
I
that.
helped book.
I remember that.
Yeah, so
But
so it was really it was quite with just three of us doing like a kind of a
yeah,
nightly news show. It was pretty
you,
cool.
Vandana, and Sri. Carol wants to make sure that we don't forget that you're also an accomplished poet. And she's asking, where can we find your poems, Rose? Um,
I have they've been published in some there's Still Against War, which is a chapbook which
hmm,
is available through,
okay.
and
So what is
the
that called? What's the name again?
Still Against War, three
Okay.
words.
Okay. Great. Um,
And then I have my husband and I, my husband is a poet, a funny poet, and
oh,
he was approached by a children's book publisher to say, we're writing a book about inspirational people. Maybe you could write a funny one and your wife could write a serious one. So we had to find somebody that we could both, be passionate about, and that
absolutely.
is Steven Spielberg. So there's a
Oh,
book
wow.
in this inspirational poetry book, with one by me and uh and one by Alan.
And
And
right
it
on
was
cue,
great because if I really got, so when the Fablemans came out, I was like, oh, they're so excited.
right on cue, Deborah encouraged us to mention this clever Queens-born picture book writing hubby, and to plug his great parodies. I put clever in quotes. I had the incredible joy of interviewing him on Sri's Sunday New York Times read along at the end of last year. In 2021, he was our last guest of the year, and we had a great time. We had a great time on the show, so definitely enjoyed my time with him. Um, Before we move on to the paper, I do want to make sure that we give a shout out to She's on Call, this show that you worked on with Julia and Vandana as well. It was hosted by Dr. Sujana Chandrashekar and Dr. Marina Kurian. Um, you know, it was an incredible run, about a year and a half. All the doctor shows, for folks who may not be familiar with it, we actually spun the show off of the New York Times read along. When COVID first hit, we actually had several doctors join us from 10 to 10:30, an extra kind of half hour to talk about various medical issues. And in fact, it reminds me that one of the last guests we had before lockdown was a Dr. Akash Agarwal. The reason I bring that up is that his specialty, I think it was March, it was colorectal awareness month, a colorectal cancer awareness month. Um, Sri would have been in the chair today, except he is busy today. He is getting a colonoscopy tomorrow, and he is doing the prep work for a colonoscopy. If folks know what that entails, he wouldn't be able to be sitting in this chair for more than just a few minutes, running back and forth to the little boys' room. But he did want me to make sure to mention that, and to encourage everyone to make sure to take care of your health, make sure to get your checkups, vaccines, etc., that you might need. But the She's on Call, which you helped name the show, and then of course help produce and pull off, was an incredible source of support for people as well. And we were thrilled to see it flourish and succeed. Um, the what I want to do is to go back to the paper now, and we have the front page that we're going to focus on. And Rose, while I move over to the paper, did you have a chance to take a look at the front page in terms of the bylines? I know one of the things that we did on that very first show when I had you in July 2018, we took a look at, how many bylines were from women and how many were from men, what that mix was like. So let's
I
let's
did
take a look
not
at
have a
that.
chance with my summit coming up to look at that.
Sure,
And
sure.
like I get the Sunday Times, but I know that it's never the the final, because I live in Connecticut, so
Hey, I'm in DC, so it's completely different. But we'll do our best in terms of looking at the front page together to see what we can suss out, and maybe Soumya can help as well if there's some names that we don't recognize. Uh, I see Hannah Dreyer has the display story on underage migrants. Roger Cohen has the lead story about Europe. So we're 1-1 so far. Um, there's a Nicole Hong on the China story, and then a Zhu Wang. I don't know the gender for that, of course, but Nicole does seem like a woman's name. Farnaz, as actually, and a friend of Sri's, is on the Iranian hijab story. Um, Dan Barry, I didn't look closely earlier, but Dan Barry, former guest on the show, a great friend of ours, has the story about the bombing at the World Trade Center. Um, so just for those main stories, that's not too bad, huh?
no,
Uh,
it's not too bad.
Hannah with the display, and then Nicole and Farnaz with the two stories over there. So let's take a look at the inside of the front section first, and then we will make sure to spend time with the New York Times for Kids. We had Megan DeTrolio join us at the end of the year. She is the editor for A2, A3, and they did a redesign. The inside the Times, the story behind the story. This one focuses on at her alma mater, a reporter covers another shooting. This is probably Michigan State. The Rocket Monument at Michigan State University has been turned into a memorial for the 3 students who died in a shooting this month. That was just on Valentine's Day, if I'm not mistaken, or the day before. But Sophia, this is a first-person account. Sophia Lada graduated from Michigan State University in 2022. She reported from campus the night of the shooting there this month, while her sister, a current student, sheltered in a classroom. That'll be a powerful story to read. Powerful first-person account. Let's take a look at the dateline where Times journalists are reporting from around the world. We have Mexico City, Wilmore, Kentucky, Milan, and Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Again, an effort to show people that Times reporters are out there going to where the story is. And a word through the Times, tracing how one word or phrase has changed through history. They use the word swipe, which is very interesting. Even without reading it, you can tell that at some point swipe referred to stealing something, and obviously now we're referring to swiping on our phones. Swipe right, swipe left. Below the fold, their here to help story: how to shop and adjust to a hearing aid. I know that is something that several people have had to deal with and have had challenges with. So that'll be helpful for sure. So let's take a look at what else they have. We'll just go through this fairly quickly. The international story: Albania reeling from an enormous cyber attack linked to Iran. Assault on NATO ally poses test for alliance. We also like looking at the front full page ads. Hospital CEOs across America unite to fight gun violence. That is good news. This is from the National Healthcare CEO Council on Gun Safety and Violence Prevention. Their tagline: guns are now the leading cause of death for kids. This needs to change. The story on the left is the one about Iran as women lose hijabs, hair flows free in Iran. And you're going to be doing one of your panels is going to be focusing on Iran.
Yes, I
Rose?
read some of that story, and I noticed that on Twitter, where I follow,
Farnaz?
Iranian woman, that I've been
Yep.
noticing, just a lot of pictures of women without, coverings on their head, just walking in the street, and then I saw this story and I said, huh. I mean, it's not only, of course, it's not just the hijabs that the protests are about. I think there's no returning back. I think that the sentiment is they want a change of government.
Absolutely. I want to take a quick moment and come back on camera to highlight a comment. And I'm sorry I didn't see it when we were first talking about it. We were talking about Sri's colonoscopy. Pradnya said, "You are reminding me I need to reschedule mine." I encourage you to do that, Pradnya. I'll fess up as well. I had a Cologuard box sitting in our bathroom for several months. I think it expired. My doctor said I could get away with doing that, not I don't have to do the full colonoscopy, but I still have to actually take care of my, I'm going to say it, I got to take care of my shit and get it done. So I will have to do that, get a new box. But in particular, I want to call up this comment from Stefan that we please mention and remember our dear friend Tim McDonald, who has been one of the biggest advocates of getting colon screenings, all while fighting his own battle with cancer. And he needs a liver transplant. So please connect and support Tim's search for a liver donor, timsliver.com. And I want to make sure that folks see that. Tim has been a great friend of ours, a great friend of the show, always amplifying the work that we put out. So Tim, wanted to let you know we're thinking about you and we wish you all the best. Absolutely.
There's somebody playing in a golf tournament on his behalf. Tim
Wow.
posted this
Wow.
weekend, wearing his color, and because he can't participate, I think he's in chemo again now. It sounds like,
yeah.
But great guy.
Great guy. It's great though. I mean, if you're friends with him on social, he's posting sunrise pictures every day. Every day he sees a sunrise, which is just wonderful to see. Naomi says, "Don't procrastinate getting colonoscopy. It's your duty." Sorry, I'm trying to channel Alan as much as I can.
Getting scatological.
It's hard not to go there. It's a serious matter, but you got to have a little fun with it as well. But Deborah says, as a public health person, I appreciate your health info on this read along. Absolutely. I'm gonna call out. So for folks who don't know, I felt like I got to know Alan really well on that show. We got to be good friends. We had a little bit of a thing back and forth about who was funny and who wasn't. But Rose, has Alan had his tests? Has he had a colonoscopy yet?
He takes his duty very seriously.
I am glad he does. I will take that as an answer. And yes, Naomi, we do have to have a sense of humor. So with that little bit, let's go back to the paper and see what's there. And again, Rose, if there's an article that I pass by and that you want to comment on, please be sure to stop me. This continues after 8 turbulent years. Nigerians head to polls, desperate for change. Here are Ukraine stories. A year of conflict in Ukraine has left Europe forever changed. This is the jump from the front page. And then Beijing to host leader of Belarus, raising concerns over Ukraine. Let's see. Beijing's push for a baby boom is greeted with public skepticism. And let's see what else. Then we get to the national section. We have in California town, floods destroy farm workers' hard-won idle. Fierce series of storms wash away what took some decades to build. That is certainly not good news in California. This is the continuation of the Dan Barry story. The bombing became a historical footnote, but he will never forget. This is referring to Tim Lang, a survivor of the 93 World Trade Center bombing. City tells youth centers for homeless the clients must never sleep there. And this is an interesting, this is the migrant story, alone, underage, and exploited for labor across the U.S. So some really great photography across the top and a 2-page spread. I'll show you.
Yeah, really important story. I started reading it, that these kids are 13, 14, 10, working in factories. And what's interesting, I tried to read to the bottom. I didn't get to the bottom, but it cited big companies that we've heard of. Like, I'm trying to remember if you could look, like Cheetos brands or something like that. And I was looking for a statement from the company saying, we're not aware of this, or we're going to look into this, or we deny this, and I didn't see it. And I would have expected to see that high up if a reporter is, if the report is citing these particular companies employing underage workers.
I went to switched to the phone, not as smoothly as I would like. But I switched to the phone to be able to show you the full view.
So let me show
what that looks like.
For folks,
because they really did. They
went with a 2-page spread
on the
hopefully you see this. The resolution doesn't look great.
Not sure why the connection isn't good. But it gives you a sense at least of how much real estate they gave to the story. I just wanted to give you a sense of that. But Rose, you were saying you had taken a quick look at that story. And you were looking for companies that were mentioned, right?
Well, there were companies mentioned right in the first, upper half of the story, and I was looking for statement, the reporter asking for statements from the companies on this, and I didn't see that. So I was just surprised because as an investigative reporter, you would always, go to the company and put pretty high up if they said they have no comment.
Sure.
If you're going to identify such huge companies.
The story actually continues on a third page back here as well.
But I think this is a good, this is a kind of journalism that especially the New York Times does well, because they're highlighting something that, most people are not talking about, and they have the resources to go in and cover this the way they have.
Sure. So that's the front page section, at least as printed in DC. It continues with a few more pages. It'll be the Metro, etc. But as we're hitting 9:45, I want to make sure that we spend some time with New York Times for Kids and the New York Times Magazine special story as well. And what I'd like to do, Rose, with your permission, is make sure we leave time to read the poem in your honor since it's in the paper this week. So let's take a look at that. And I want to remind folks that in case you joined us late, you can always catch the full show from the beginning on whatever link you're watching on. It'll be live. As soon as we finish, you'll be able to watch the show from the beginning on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and our Digimentors website right when we're done. It's definitely worth watching and getting back to Women to Follow. So let's take a look at New York Times for Kids. There are actually two covers in this for this issue, the way they printed it. Some folks got this cover of iceberg lettuce. The focus on this is growing, gone. Plant seeds now, pick fruits and veggies later. So let's take a look at what they have. You need headphones. Which ones? Now, this would be helpful for anyone, not just kids, in terms of shopping. But I will say I'm going to take a closer look at this later. I need to get a new pair of headphones for my daughter, Emily, at 9. She uses them at school. And I gave her an extra set of earbuds that I had. But their final pick, they have an at-home test, sound safety test, a real kid test. And then their final pick, if the headphones made it through all those tests, they then received Wirecutter's recommendation. So it's actually using Wirecutter to do this. And Emmett Linder has the story. Emmett is a good friend of the show as well. I will show you the pictures of the covers. Let's try and get that up into the corner. So you see that in the bottom left. We had the iceberg lettuce cover. There's also a potato cover at the bottom. So they did two versions. Do you get the fresh and friendly head of lettuce or the rooty and slightly grumpy sweet potato? These two covers were inspired by seed packets from history because growing food and flowers is evergreen. So let's see what else we have. Of course, now I don't remember how I folded the page. Oops. Let's fix this real quickly. There we go. Very inelegant, but you do what you got to do. The national story, the new kids in special classes, kids who recently moved to the U.S. learn the ropes. Very interesting story. This is probably about potentially migrants. It's in the schools, a newcomer class at Urban Promise Academy in Oakland, California. In the school's newcomer program, students who are recent immigrants get help with their English, learn about American culture, and lean on one another for support.
I read this. I went through this section. So yeah, I thought that was a good story and a good way to show kids, what's happening in other parts.
You went through the section because you went to our website and got the PDF?
Yes, I did.
So that's a good reminder for folks that you can go to our website to get the full PDF of this New York Times for Kids special section, but only until noon today. There's a section find your roots, learn the language. That's kind of an interesting take on roots. There's a piece about hip hop at half court in the bottom left corner. Strawberries in February. So that's a gardening special. And a whole thing about it starts with a seed, about how I became a horticulturist. That's the article at the bottom. Let's see what else. And here's the centerfold, and this is really interesting. Blooming for beginners, tools and materials, easy seeds, the right spot, when to do what, and then how to grow a garden. And that's a whole 2-page spread they have in the middle. So definitely take a look at the PDF to get the full picture. There's a science section, a new vaccine, but it's not for you. I think it's for the bees. And then flush, panic, plunge. What's this? How to deal with a clogged toilet. That is very interesting. And they have some talk about, we're going to have to show this. So the first half, 5 steps to send poop on its way. You want to get Alan just to make sure he sees this, Rose? Know your toilet, the tank, the handle, the plunger, all that. And then, you start, shows how to plunge a toilet, how to remove the clog. But it also has some good diagrams showing 2 little poops working its way down the pipes. And the last one is know when to quit. If the clog hasn't budged after 10 minutes of plunging, it's probably not going to, meaning it's time to get a parent and probably a plumber to help. Who knew you'd be talking about poop on today's show?
Well, I can see for kids, that's a good hint to tell them how to use a plunger.
The sports section, ready, set, slide. This is and how I became a sports medicine surgeon. So this is members of the USA Luge Junior Development Team that they focused on here. And then they have their opinion piece, would speak out. And the kids range from age 9 to 10. I don't see anyone older, mostly all 9 and 10-year-old, which is always the clue in terms of who their audience is, who they're really targeting. So we always love looking at the New York Times for Kids. And their back page is a tiger by Sophia G. with a quote by Joseph. People should stop hunting tigers for their fur, for fun, and for medicine. Imagine if you were a tiger free in the wild and then boom, you are shot for your fur. How would you feel? Joseph T. We make the New York Times for Kids just for you. Thank you for sharing your opinions with us. And one of the things to note is that there are no ads in the New York Times for Kids, which is nice. That's an ad-free zone. So definitely make sure to get your PDF from the website before noon today. The other article we wanted to focus on, and I'll just check to see if there are any comments real quick. Let's see, what are some of the comments that came in before we close out and look at the section. So scrolling back up, Stefan always takes crap seriously in life. Thank you, Stefan. I knew I could count on you for that. Naomi commenting on Dan Barry. Dan Barry is a journalist. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Mary Curtis is watching. Mary Curtis is a former guest on the show. Her latest roll call column talked about how child labor laws in general are being loosened in states such as Iowa and Minnesota because of labor shortages and folks who need money. And that's a reference to that migrant child labor story we were talking about. Diana said, California floods caused hundreds of thousands of damage to my kid's school. With schools running at a deficit already, it really hurt so many schools. Absolutely. My mom is wishing you all the best for the summit on Tuesday. And Diana warned me, but I saw it too late that adults are not allowed to read the kids section. We always love reading the kids, and I think that you can actually get a lot out of it. There's a lot of great content, and they make it so easy to consume. I think adults should make it a point to read the kids section. In fact, Monica is asking about the website to get the PDF, so I just want to remind her if she didn't see that, it's the scrolling on the bottom. I'll put it back up. If you go to digimentors.group/NYTReadalong, you'll see Rose's show as the first item on that page, and then you'll be able to find the PDF there. And let us know if you have any difficulty getting to that, Monica. Reach out to Soumya or myself. Tag me in a comment to make sure I see it. Some more comments about poop and plumbing from Naomi and Diana. Certainly is a very popular topic with the kids. So let's go ahead and close out. We won't forget the poem, but let's close out and look at this special report on COVID and how we're dealing with it in terms of our memory. This New York Times cover picture, it's a picture from Chinatown, as was mentioned earlier. 3 years later, we still don't know how to talk about what happened. Rose, is COVID over?
I just got it in for the first time in December, just in time for all the holidays. So
you just got it. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I did the show. That's what I would say to people. I did the COVID show for almost 3 years and the doctor show. I never got COVID. And I think maybe I went to a baby shower and, it was just nobody was, masked, and maybe, that I got it there. But it was no fun.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think it's not over, and just, it's not over also in terms of how it's affected our lives, right? Everything has changed.
Yeah. And I should note that the gift link to the COVID article is also on our website. So if you want to go there, digimentors.group/NYTReadalong, you'll find a gift link to this story. Most, the way they set up the text, what happened to us? Most Americans think they know the story of the pandemic, but when I immerse myself in a COVID oral history project, I realize how much we're still missing. So you see some of the photographs here by Ashley Gilbertson, and the story is by John Muallim. It takes you back to, the first year of the pandemic. Hospital workers, emergency workers were, being feted every evening in New York City. People would lean out their windows and make noise to remember them, to honor them, to thank them for their work. You see people at delis had put up barriers. The face shields over here. I think that a lot of people have, wanted to move on quickly. They wanted to get on with their lives, and for some people, COVID was, the isolation and the change in their work habits, their school habits was too much. Um, I'll be the first one to say that my life changed for the better with COVID in terms of getting to work with Digimentors, moving into live stream production. Um, you know, it's been good. And what I'll say is that I had so many of my interactions online. I didn't, it wasn't that I was cut off from people. I was meeting different people every day throughout the day. So I still had that social interaction. I know that some people didn't have that, but it was challenging. But there's some of the images you see from this is from Chinatown on the left. We were like this one quote. We were like a bunch of ants standing on our back legs, with our front legs in the air, and a meteor coming. One of the things that was interesting is that in this oral history project, they went back to talk to some of the people who had first, they did interviews with at the beginning of the pandemic, and 2 or 3 years later, they didn't want to do follow-up interviews. They didn't want to think about what that time was like for them, which is certainly interesting. So this goes into a different story. It's continued on 51 further back. So let's see if they have any, if it's just text or if there are any more pictures. I think they just finish up the article over here. So certainly a powerful time. Curious of what folks think about the pandemic, what their experience was, whether they're still dealing with it, and how folks have whether they've moved on or not. I would like to, as we wrap up, we're right at 10 o'clock. Your permission, I'm going to read the poem. We haven't done this in a long time. But as Sri used to say, we used to end the show with reading the poem. And we'll certainly, we'd like to have you share a tip for journalists, Rose, before you go. But I will read the poem first. The poem is selected by Anne Boyer. Anne is a poet and essayist. Her memoir about cancer and care, The Undying, won a 2020 Pulitzer Prize in general nonfiction. Poetry's supposed timelessness means that we sometimes overlook its capacity to memorialize a precise moment. But Peter Gizzi's In Defense of Nothing, an earlier poem from this major American poet's long career, reminds us, reminds me that poetry too is a seismograph of vibes. And I'll just take that banner off the page. Anyone familiar with the concept of the 1990s might recognize the cunning of this poem's slacker mood, the whatever and wonder precisely calibrated, neither one of them surrendering fully to the other. It's a road poem, too, full of the sideways views of trees and trailers, the landscape lived at interstate speed. This cool mix of understatement and awe of industrial society and its atoms preserves the poem's present. It's important and accurate that the poem ends with a hint of ironic and plaintive liberation, a power line, a poetic line broken free. So here's the poem by Peter Gizzi, In Defense of Nothing. I guess these trailers lined up in the lot of the highway will do. I guess that crooked eucalyptus tree also. I guess this highway will have to do, and the cars and the people in them on their way. The present is always coming up to us, surrounding us. It's hard to imagine atoms, hard to imagine hydrogen and oxygen binding. It'll have to do. This sky with its macular clouds also, and that electric tower to the left. One line, broken free. That's In Defense of Nothing by Peter Gizzi. As Sri would always say, a poem should really be read by the poet, because they know the meter, they know where the emphasis should be. It should never be read cold by an amateur, but we do it anyway. And there you go, a poem for the first time in a long time, Rose, just since you are on the show today.
Honored, definitely.
Our guest has been Rose Horowitz. And we talked about the Women to Follow show, Women to Follow Summit that is going to be on Tuesday, February 28th. Certainly encourage everyone to learn more about it, to register. Go to womentofollow.com. That is women-to-follow.com. And if you can't watch on Tuesday, register so you can watch later. And we certainly want to encourage you to do that. And Rose, congratulations on not just the summit, but also all of the work you've done with Women to Follow.
Thank you.
Before we let you go, we want to ask you for a pro tip for journalists. What would your recommendation be?
I would say, read and talk widely. Don't limit your sources to one publication, one point of view. Really try to take in a big picture. So if you're in a city, look at whatever publications there might be, whether they're online or, community based, and, find out what's going on in the community. And also, just sometimes, not every story, but, sort of dip down and read to the bottom and see what the background is, and see ways that you might take action when you read a story, if it's important to you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Rhodes. I want to make sure to give a shout out to Soumya Grover. You see Sri and I on the air on screen, but Soumya is backstage helping to engage with the audience and share links to on Sri's Facebook and LinkedIn, sharing links to the articles that we're covering and more. And I know that she was sharing links to a lot of the speakers, Rose, and a lot of the Twitter handles for the people who are speaking as part of the event. We want to give a shout out to our sponsor, our longtime sponsor, Muckrack. Thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. And we also want to acknowledge the Local Connection newsletter. Every week, the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University brings you the Local Connection newsletter, offering story ideas and pro tips for journalists. Best of all, it's free. You can subscribe at bit.ly/local-news-tips, bit.ly/local-news-tips. And we want to remind you that this is a production of Digimentors. We create impact, whether it's digital marketing, events and digital programs, strategic communications, training and workshops, or staffing and recruiting. We can help you. Get in touch if we can help you with any of these types of projects. We had several people share some comments before we go, Rose, that I want to bring on the screen. We have Mary Curtis saying thank you for the conversation and for the great work you do, and for following her work. That's part of the community that we built up. That's part of the.
She was a guest on a few COVID shows, and I do follow her. Some of her listen to her podcasts and things. Yeah. So thank you, Mary.
And I do want to acknowledge we're a few minutes over time. My apologies for that. Diana Rahini said, excellent show. Rose is such a great guest. I love her fun spirit. She's been hanging out with Alan for all these years. You figure something would have rubbed off eventually. Jonathan said, great show. Thank you. And thank you, Jonathan, for being one of our many loyal viewers. Again, if you joined us late, you can watch the show from the very beginning on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. You can still share it with people so they can watch the replay. A lot of great information about the Women to Follow Summit, which again is on Tuesday, February 28th from 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that on the screen, full screen for everyone, Rose.
Thank you.
So that
Thank you.
people will make sure to see it. And one of those tricks is on Twitter. When we end the show, this is what people see first before the show plays from the beginning. So I'm going to leave this right here for a moment. Thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.